And happy Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, and welcome to a brand new edition of what I like to call For the Birds. I am your host, the vegan you believe in, Kurt Cadet, aka Conscious Kurt in the flesh as always. And here on For the Birds, I like to talk about different forms of toxic and negative behavior, the effects that behavior has on us and our mental health, and what we can do to have a better understanding of it and have more control over it in order to have a better quality of our lives going forward. I want to talk to you guys today about something that a lot of people struggle with, a lot of people have a hard time with, but if more people maybe gave this thing a chance and got out of their own head, maybe living their lives this way wouldn't be as bad as they make it out to be. And that thing I want to talk to you guys today about is being single. A lot of people, especially when you get around to be my age, mid to late 30s, etc., they have this issue with being alone and not being in a relationship and not having that significant other to come home to. And granted, it's good to have those things and it's a huge plus to have those things in your life under the right circumstances. But unfortunately, something that a lot of people don't understand is just because you don't have those things, that doesn't mean necessarily that there's something wrong with you or that you have to be unhappy because you don't have them. Yeah, for some reason, being single gets a bad rap a lot of the time, but in all honesty, it is not that bad. I'll break down the many reasons why it's not that bad in a few minutes, but to be real, there is a lot of good that can come from being single. In many ways, being single and just living your own life on your own terms, it can save you a lot of stress and a lot of drama in your life, in all honesty, that you do not need. And I'm not telling you need to hoe around and fuck anything that moves or anything like that. Although if you want to, that's your prerogative. But just having that lifestyle where you can live on your own terms and make your own rules to that degree, it's not such a bad thing. And if more people would maybe embrace that part of being single and embrace the good parts of it, maybe it wouldn't depress them so badly when they are single and bother them so much when they are single. Because me, myself, I've been single overall for about 2 years. And granted, there are times where I would like to have a significant other to go out on dates with and spend time with in my apartment and have fun with and all that jazz. Honestly, being single isn't the worst thing in the world. It's really not. And for any of you who think it is the worst thing in the world or think there's something wrong with you because you're single, yo, just relax. It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And I'm going to talk you through this whole thing today so you have more of an understanding of it. But first, let's break down the reasons why people sometimes have a hard time being single and they can't handle living the single life. What is it about the single life that makes them feel this way? Well, a big reason why, a major reason why at that, is the fear of being alone. Sadly, believe it or not, there are a lot of people who just, for whatever reason, cannot live their lives alone. And the thought of living their lives alone and being single is something that they just cannot bear and they cannot deal with. No matter what's going on in their lives, whether good or bad, they for some reason always need to have somebody else around. And I think that in many cases is what causes a lot of people in relationships to be super clingy, super attached. And when somebody does go that route, they end up making a lot of mistakes that cost them big time. Yeah, a lot of people have a hard time just being in their own thoughts, being by themselves, and being in their own company. And the reason why they probably have such a problem with it is because they don't fully know themselves. Because they're so scared of being alone, they're so scared of not having a significant other to come home to. They never took the time to really get to know themselves, who they are, why they are the way they are, why they do the things they do, and what's good about themselves and what's bad about themselves. Yeah, something just as simple as going to the movies by yourself or going to a restaurant by yourself or a concert by yourself. People like this just can't do it. They always need to have someone, in this case, a significant other, that they do every single last thing with. And after a while, that significant other that they need to do every single last thing with can understandably so end up feeling suffocated, end up feeling smothered, and end up feeling like they don't have a moment of peace. And it can get to the point where that person who's being smothered and being suffocated can have enough of it and be tired of it that they end up walking away and, in some cases, running away. And instead of dealing with those issues and trying to fix those issues, that person who's so scared of being alone to the point where they push other people away and push significant others away will be in a rush to find the next person that they can do it to. Because they can't handle being alone. The thought of being alone, the thought of being by themselves literally scares the shit out of them. But unfortunately, instead of dealing with that and figuring out why that's such an issue, they're in a rush to jump into the next relationship and the relationship after that and the relationship after that. And as a result, they more than likely end up recycling the same experiences. And until they deal with that fear of being alone and find out why they feel that way, jumping into another relationship is not going to fix their problem. And another reason why people can't handle being single and can't live their lives being single is because they have no identity outside of their relationships. This kind of, in a way, ties into a fear of being alone. But many people, when they dive so deep into whatever relationship they're in or whatever significant other they have, they dive in so deep that they have no identity and no idea of who they are outside of that said relationship. That person that they're with, that person that they spend all their time with, that's pretty much their whole life. Everything inside of them, everything in them just goes 100% into that relationship. And yes, it is important to put a lot of yourself into relationships and work hard at them and all that. But it's not a good look and it's not okay when you lose yourself and you lose your identity in the process. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say over the years that they are literally nothing without their significant other. Yeah, without their significant other, they can't go on with life, they can't live life, and they can't do anything unless that person is there with them. And there's one thing between your relationship becoming a part of who you are, but it's another thing when your relationship becomes all of who you are. And if you don't know who you are outside of your relationship or outside of the time you spend with your significant other, then who are you? In all honesty, who are you? Yeah, any relationship where you lose yourself and you forget who you are in the process is honestly not one that's healthy and not one that's probably going to last in the long run. Yeah, being in a relationship under the right circumstances is great, and having that special bond with someone that you can do everything with and talk to about everything with is great. But if you're not enough without that, you'll never be enough with it. And finally, another reason why people have a hard time being single and they always have to be in a relationship is because it's comfortable. Yeah, for many people, after a while, their relationship will become more like a routine. And when it becomes more like a routine in that sense, it can get very boring and it can get very dull at times. And while granted that is something that's natural to happen in any relationship, and when those things do happen, you do need to work through it, there are other times when it's clear the relationship isn't going anywhere and it's not going to get any better, but people still choose to stay in it anyway because it's comfortable, because it's normal, because it's familiar. And if they were to break up and if they were to end the relationship, things would now be different. Now they would be uncomfortable. Now they would be in a place where they would have to start over. And granted, that's not always a fun process. It's definitely a struggle at times. But just staying in a relationship and staying with somebody just because it's comfortable, just because it's familiar and normal, and honestly, there's no real good that's coming from it, that is not happy people shit. Yeah, sadly, people are just so comfortable and so set in being in a relationship, even if it's not a good one, that they'll stay in it just to avoid that feeling of being uncomfortable. And that feeling of uncertainty is so strong and so powerful that instead of taking that chance and exploring that, they'll choose to stay in the same place with the same person until they're bored to death. And I know sometimes it's not easy to let go of what's comfortable and what's normal and what you're familiar with, but sometimes choosing not to do so will keep you stagnant, will keep you from growing, will keep you from actually living your life and maybe finding the happiness that you're searching for. But I'm telling you, that happiness you're looking for is not going to be found in that relationship you're staying in just because you don't want to be uncomfortable. The longer you stay in a dead relationship, the more dead you're going to feel inside as time goes on. So now that I've broken down the different reasons why people may be afraid of being single and afraid of being by themselves, what are some of the benefits they can receive from choosing to go that route and choosing to be single and live their lives that way? What are some of the benefits and good things that can come from it? Well, one of those major things that would come from that lifestyle is time to find themselves. As I mentioned before, a lot of people tie their whole identity and their whole life to the relationship they're in. And sometimes when people do that, they along the way forget who they are. And that's a scary thing when you forget who you are, when you forget what makes you you. It's not a good place to be, not physically, not mentally, not emotionally, none of it. Being in that place where you don't know who you are and you don't know what your identity is, it's not a good place. I promise you, it is not. But when you're single and you don't have that relationship or that significant other to attach your identity to, it gives you time to figure it out on your own. When you spend your time by yourself, whether it's going to the movies, whether it's going to the park, whether it's going to a restaurant, whether you're just chilling at the house, when you have that amount of time to spend by yourself, it does give you a lot of time to think. To think about the things in your life that you do right, the things in your life you do wrong, maybe the goals that you have for the future, and also what you may look for in a potential spouse whenever you do find yourself in that position again. Yeah, when you take your time to get to know yourself and build yourself up and have your own identity, in many cases, it'll help your chances whenever you do decide to date again. Because chances are the person who has their own identity, who believes in themselves and who knows who they are, is going to have a much better chance at finding a significant other and in finding people to date than that person who's so attached and so consumed with finding a spouse and finding a mate. And if they can't find it, then they're going to fall apart. Yeah, because like I said a few minutes ago, I have been single for the last 2 years or so. And granted, like I said, there are some things about dating that I do miss, and I haven't been on a lot of dates in that time frame. But I will say, and I believe this myself, I am a far better catch now than I was 2 years ago when that last relationship first ended. And the reason why is because I've taken this time to fix a lot of my issues, deal with a lot of my issues. And most of all, I learned to be happy without a lot of outside forces. And one of those outside forces being a relationship. Yeah, in order for any relationship to be strong and to last a long time, it needs people in it who already know who they are before they get into it, who already have a strong sense of self, who have a confidence and love for themselves that they can bring to the table when they find that significant other. Yeah, because if you don't have that self love and you don't have that self confidence, you're not going to be any good to whoever you end up dating. And you'll just keep recycling the same experiences, the same breakups, until you actually sit down and fix what's inside you. So that's why I say when you have that time to find yourself, you have that time to do that soul searching, then you will more than likely find that happiness that you are looking for. And then if you end up finding a significant other that you click with, connect with, and have a good time with, then something like that will simply just be a bonus. But when you have it inside of you and you know who you are without that stuff, then that's all you need. Really is. And another reason why being single isn't so bad and people should embrace it more and see the good in it more is because by choosing to be single, you won't be settling. And that's the problem with a lot of relationships. A lot of people choose to be with a certain somebody and stay with a certain somebody. And by doing that, they are settling. And when that person they choose to be with is somebody that they don't really vibe with, somebody they don't really have much of a connection with, somebody whose values don't align with theirs, and somebody just in general they're just with just because they're afraid of being by themselves, then that is settling. And I've learned over the years that settling in a relationship is 10 times worse than being single. Yeah, because being in a relationship where you guys connect, where you guys click, where you guys have a good time together, that's one thing. But when you're just in a relationship because you want to keep up appearances, because it's comfortable, and because you're afraid of spending a Saturday night alone, that is not a relationship worth preserving. Relationships like that don't have strong legs on them, they don't have a good foundation underneath them, and sooner or later, the relationship and the people in them are going to crumble. And that settling shit, that staying with somebody just because you're afraid of being alone bullshit, that shit is for the birds. And hey, I'm not saying being single doesn't have its challenges sometimes. There are times that many of you, I'm sure, can relate to where you do miss that companionship, you miss that connection, and in some cases, you long for it. But one lesson I learned many years ago that really stuck with me is that it's better to be alone than be in bad company. Like, for instance, I know many of you saw last week that video of that one girl who refused to get out of the car on her date because her date took her to the Cheesecake Factory. And it became this whole thing. And by the end of the video, the girl was just left to be embarrassed because of the way she behaved. And also for the fact that the guy was going to take her to another restaurant that was better. But because she took so long to get ready, they lost their reservation. So she ended up in this video not only looking ridiculous because of the way she behaved, but even more ridiculous for the fact that it went viral. Now everybody else sees how ridiculous she acted. And I use this as an example because with somebody like that, somebody who behaves that way, whether they're a man or a woman, you are way better off being single than dealing and having to put up with somebody like that. Because the single life, the life where you're just doing your own thing by yourself, is 10 times better and 10 times happier than having to deal with somebody like that every day. And that's what's really helped me over these last few years, is I've chosen not to settle so much. I try to look past somebody's looks and somebody's physical appearance and see what's beyond that. And if what I see beyond that is something that I don't like and I don't find attractive, then no matter how hot they are on paper, no matter how good they look on paper, I'm not interested. And many of you would be doing yourselves a lot of good if you chose not to just settle with someone just because you're afraid of being alone. Yeah, because whenever you're in a relationship, it should be something that adds value to your life, something that you're happy in, something that you really want to invest in physically, mentally, and emotionally, and something that provides a big return upon that investment. But when it's not that, and you choose to just settle because you're afraid of what's on the other side of not settling, then what you end up with in the process will not really be anything to brag about. And finally, a big reason why more people should embrace being single and realize that it's not as bad as they may make it out to be is because it's freedom. Anytime I've ended up breaking up with somebody that I knew deep down there was no future with and deep down that it wasn't working, the main feeling that I felt when that relationship ended was the feeling of freedom, the feeling of the chains breaking off, and more than anything, the feeling of a new beginning. Were there some sad feelings that came with it also? Sure, there were. But if it's a situation where you know it's not working, you guys aren't clicking, and that it's not an investment that's really paying off, then getting out of that situation and breaking free of that situation is a win. And when you're out of that situation, you're not tied down to that other person, You can do your own thing. You can live your life on your own terms. You don't have to answer to anyone. You don't have to check in with anyone all the time. You can just go out, live your life, and be free. Yeah, because relationships, as great as they are, and for all the things they do have to offer, there's also a certain level of freedom that you don't have when you are in one. And when you have that freedom and you have that free time to do what you want when you want, there's nothing wrong with embracing that. There's nothing wrong with being happy with that. And there's nothing wrong with making the most out of that time. Yeah, any relationship you get out of where you feel free once it's over is definitely a relationship that needed to end. And yeah, there is an adjustment period sometimes, and there is a mourning period sometimes at that too. But once you move past that mourning period, once you move past that feeling of discomfort you go through or that fear of being alone, once you move past all of that, there's a whole new life and a whole new way of thinking that'll be waiting for you on the other side of it. Yeah, you get that feeling of freedom, you get that feeling of not having to answer to anybody. Embrace that shit. Because trust me, it is a good thing. It is a very good thing. Yeah, because people become so depressed over not having a girlfriend or not having a boyfriend and feel like there's something wrong with them if they don't have those things. But in many cases, there probably isn't. Sure, all of us do have things we need to work on, and all of us aren't perfect. We're all works in progress. But it's not healthy to beat yourself up and think that there's something wrong with you or that you're not lovable just because you're not in a relationship. When you spend so much time dwelling on that stuff and dwelling on all the downsides of being single, you miss out on so much of the good sides and all the freedom that comes from being single. Because while you may be searching for that happiness and searching for that peace and all that, it could be right under your nose. But you won't find it until you get out of your own head, stop dwelling on the negatives that come from being single, and maybe start to focus on the good that comes from being single. Because being able to live your life free, live your life by your own rules, and not have to answer to somebody all the time is a beautiful way to live. There's nothing wrong with being in a relationship as long as it's a good and healthy one, but just living your own life, being single, being on your own, it's a beautiful thing. And whoever told you it's not a beautiful thing, they lied to your ass. Because living that single life, loving yourself, having confidence, knowing who you are, and being free, that should be the goal. That should be what people should strive for. Because that true joy, that true happiness is something that you should have on your own. You can't get it from a relationship. You can't get it from a significant other. The only place you can get it from is you. And when you finally realize that and you finally start to live your life on your own terms and be free, then any relationship or any significant other that comes along the way will only add to that. And that's the way it should be. Yeah, because having a relationship, having a significant other to come home to every day should be something that adds to your happiness, not something that your happiness depends on. So, my final thoughts on this whole topic are this. I personally enjoy being in a relationship, spending time with a girl, getting to know her, having a connection with her. All those things are great. But something I had to learn a long time ago that I'm very grateful I learned now is that you can't base your happiness or base your identity on having those things. Because when your happiness and your identity is based on all of those things, and those things end up going away, disappearing, ending abruptly, however it happens, then you're not going to know what to do when that time comes. You're going to fall apart, you're going to have a breakdown, and you're going to feel like you're worthless because you don't have that relationship. But when you know who you are, when you have your own identity, and your identity is not tied to whoever you're dating, then no matter what happens, whether that relationship lasts forever or ends next week, you'll be okay with it. You'll know how to handle it. You'll know how to handle whatever comes your way, deal with whatever comes your way. And if you end up being single again, end up being on your own again, it won't be the end of the world. Like I said, being in a relationship is a great thing. Having a significant other is a great thing. But when you have no identity outside of it and you don't know how to be happy outside of it, then it's worthless. I'm sorry to say that relationship is worthless without those things. Because I've dated a lot of girls and been in a lot of relationships where either my happiness was attached to it or their happiness was attached to it. But regardless of which person it was, it never ended well. And whenever you base your happiness and you base your self-worth on a significant other, it typically does not have a happy ending. But when you learn to let that go and you learn how to be happy on your own and learn that you don't need another person to complete you, make you happy, and bring you joy, then that's the real W. That's the real flex. And that's something that's worth bragging about. So that's why I say embrace that freedom that comes with being single for as long as you have it. And whenever you do find someone who does add value to your life and who you do have a genuine connection with, and it's a situation you can see lasting long term, then great, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. But just know that you don't need those things in order to be happy, fulfilled, and feel like you actually matter. So whenever somebody asks you what you bring to the table in a relationship, you can respond by saying, I bring self fulfillment, self acceptance, and most of all, self happiness. And as long as you can bring those things to the table, then that relationship will have a far greater chance at succeeding. Well, that's all the time I have for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoy this edition of For the Birds. And like I said before, I'm not a licensed doctor or a therapist, but I do have a lot of experience in my personal life going through these issues. So I like to use this podcast as a platform to help others and getting through those issues a lot easier than I did. And if you ever want to talk to me or connect with me in any way, you can follow me on my various social media pages, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Look up my first and last name, Kirk Cadet. Send me your friend request. Send me a message, whatever you prefer. And also, if you ever want to listen to any episodes of this podcast, you can find it on Spotify, Spreaker, or YouTube. Leave a comment, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you like about it. Let me know what you don't like about it. And let me know what other issues you also think are for the birds that I could talk about on future episodes. And for a long time to come, I will be here on this podcast exposing different forms of toxic behavior, the effects it has on us and our mental health, and what we can do to have more control over it in order to have a better quality of our lives in the future. So until next time, this is Conscious Kurt for another edition of For the Birds. Take care, have a good one, and remember, don't be an asshole in real life or social media because that shit is for the birds. Have a good one, guys.